We want to put unprecedented pressure on the government of Iran to change its behavior. And so far, they've shown no indication they're prepared to do that.
What he did today violates the Iran deal. We are now in violation of the deal. Iran has not violated yet. And what I fear is that what he's done today is going to make it more likely that either Iran acquires a nuclear weapon because they decide that we violated it, they'll restart their program, or we'll have a conflict with Iran.
The president's made it clear repeatedly that he viewed the Iran nuclear deal as one of the worst in American diplomatic history. I thought he was right on target on that. We are not going to allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. It is certainly a 180-degree reversal from the failed Obama administration.
The Trump White House snapping back sanctions on Iran that were lifted under the Obama nuclear deal. Europe now moving to thwart the White House. This as Iranians continue to risk their lives pouring into the streets in Iran in protests and strikes against the country's collapsing economy, corruption, and more. The mullah is now trying to fight back. We'll bring you that story. And to the bloody weekend in Chicago, at least 11 killed, more than 70 wounded in shootings across the city. Protesters again calling for Democrat Mayor Rahm Emanuel to step down. So what is the fix to this growing mess? We're on it. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. Money, politics, we've got the debate behind tomorrow's headlines. I'm Elizabeth McDonald. The Evening Edit starts right now. Let's get to your money. Look at this. The Dow up 39 points to 25,502. And look at this. The S&P and the NASDAQ less than 1% from record territory. Who was talking about a sleepy August? Profit season still in full swing. S&P 500 companies, their profits are up more than 24% versus last year. They're really firing in all cylinders. More on your money in just a second. But first, the U.S. restoring some of the sanctions on Iran that were lifted under Obama's nuclear deal. At midnight tonight, 12:01 to be exact, the White House will launch phase 1 of its plan. Some will prevent the sale of many raw materials to or from Iran, like aluminum, steel, and coal. Others target Iran's trade in metals like gold. Then the hammer really drops. Phase 2 kicks off in just under 3 months' time in early November. The U.S. government, the White House, will call on all allies to stop buying oil from Iran. Brent oil prices already ticking up to 73 a barrel. Gas prices at the pump up a penny from a week ago. Remember, Iran is practicing to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Here is the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeting, quote, 90 days ago, President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the failed Iran deal. Today's sanctions on the regime in Iran reimposed to counter its malign activities. The regime must use Iran's resources to help its citizens, not support terror and enrich the leadership. Joining me now is President of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Doctor, your reaction to the snapback sanctions?
Well, Liz, I think history will show as of tomorrow, August 9th, 2018, that a lifeline was given by the American president to the Iranian people. President Obama back in 2015 gave a lifeline to the regime. And even with that lifeline to the regime, with billions for doing nothing but this facade of a nuclear deal, at the end of the day, their economy is weakening. 2/3 of the rial has lost its value in the last 6 to 9 months. And even with that now, with sanctions going in on the regime, the people are saying on the streets, and even clerics in some of the mosques are saying that finally there are people listening to us, the American government's listening to us. Enough death with the dictator, enough of the aid to terrorism in the region, genocide in Syria. I think this is going to be a day tomorrow that'll show that finally America's on the side of the people and not as we were in the last 8 years on the side of the regime.
In a theocratic regime now, the clerics are standing up quickly. That's what you just said?
Absolutely. There was a couple clerics that memory showed with their sermons yesterday that are saying, you know what, we are against the ruling clerics, the mullah mafia that is in control right now, and we are for a liberalization for the real moderates. There have never been any moderates in control in Iran since 1979. That's all been an illusion to say that the Rouhanis of the world are more moderate than the Ahmadinejads. That was all basically nonsense. We're now showing that the only feasible plan for stability in the region is one that makes the Iranians turn inward to the people that are marching in the streets, to the thousands day to day, and actually allow them to weaken to the point that they may actually change the
They're
regime.
risking execution. They're risking the death penalty by taking to the streets. But what you just said is a bombshell that now clerics are standing up. Here's former Senator Joe Lieberman warning that reinstating sanctions could lead to a second Iranian revolution. Let's take a listen.
The regime in Tehran has a lot of troubles. The economy is tanking. The rial, which is their currency, has lost 80% of its value in the last year. There are protests going on in cities all over the country. And the reimposition of these sanctions, no matter what the other governments in Europe or Asia say about the Iran nuclear agreement in 2015, their businesses are not going into Iran because it's risky business. They basically don't want to make the choice that will shut them out of the American economy, which is putting these sanctions back on will. So I think if the government in Tehran is sensible and not extremist, which it usually is, it'll come back to the table for its own well-being, or there may well be a second Iranian revolution.
So clerics now risking their lives talking back against the Iranian government. There are people in the streets doing that. What is your take on Europe trying to thwart this?
Well, Europe might be upset because they've put money into selling airplanes and other things, but at the end of the day, the sanctions will flip back on them because American sanctions will be put against anyone doing business with Iran. So I don't think they can afford that. And as Senator Lieberman just appropriately said, which is even those that were trying to sell airplanes and other things, we're only doing it with the regime. If an economy doesn't have American influence, and if the people are marching in the streets, this revolution is much bigger than the one in '09 because it's in the smaller towns, in the towns where the clerics are being taught the Islamism, if you will. So this is being pushed back against the root power of the government, which is their religious leadership, which is different than it was in '09. So ultimately, Europe doesn't want to enter that on top of now new American sanctions kicking in. I think it'll all go away. They'll follow the lead of America.
The Iranian people are saying we have so much more to offer the world than Islamism, the idea of jihad to be exported around the world, or oil. We are entrepreneurs in this country. We want a different change of way of being. And remember this, Dr. Zudi, when the Obama White House gave $56 billion back to Iran and admitted some of that money would go toward funding terror. Let's watch.
The president was quite forward-leaning in advance of the nuclear deal even being completed, in acknowledging that we know that Iran supports terrorism. We know that Iran supports Hezbollah and the Assad regime. And it certainly is possible that some of the money that Iran has is being used for those purposes too.
So why give them the money if they're going to fund terror?
It just belies common sense that you would hand over billions to a regime that its people is saying in the streets they never saw a dime of it. It went to keep the thugs in power and actually allow them to live on the laurels of sucking their population dry, imprisoning and torturing minorities and vulnerable populations like women and others, and thus prevent the change that actually would have happened. So to those who say that regime change never works in the Middle East, remember the Iranian people have now lived under 39 years of theocracy. They're not going to swing back to even worse theocracy like ISIS or other things. They're going to go back to more secular democracy, different from the monarchy of the Shah, and very different than the theocracy of the Khomeinis. So I think ultimately we're going to see positive change no matter what happens, and no one can ever prove that the money, even in the last 3 years, let alone before, ever went to the people. It always went to the thugs in charge.
Dr. Zudi Jasser, love having you on. Come back soon, sir.